Join me in episode 4 as we ask the question, are these men really just far-right influencer douchebags wearing suits catering to incels in their mom's basement who can't get laid? Or do you just have a stick up your ass? As always, the answer is usually somewhere in between. Join us to see what that in-between is.
You gotta be oriented towards something. Because otherwise you're disoriented. You just spin around in circles and then you suffer. And so do people around you. It's not a good solution. Orient yourself towards something. Straighten up what you can straighten up and quit saying things that make you feel weak. And then you'll know what to do next. Yes. Clean up your room.
Yes, that is much better. Yes, as you can see, now that I am not dressed as a complete and total savage, we can have this very serious discussion about these very powerful men who are influencing global politics today. Some of those men you might already be aware of course. Some you might not be. Jordan Peterson, Matt Walsh. But before we explore all of the characters of the manosphere, before we explore the deepest, darkest secrets, the deepest fantasies of many men today, there is one man that we must know first. Possibly the most influential man of all time. Of course, I'm speaking of
the mighty and powerful Joe Rogan.
It's entirely possible.
I think one of the best ways to start this is to simply read his biography. Right, we want to get a basic, mostly unbiased understanding of who is this man, who is Joe Rogan. And of course, the best place to get unbiased and accurate information on the internet is Wikipedia. So we're going to read his biography. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. Here we go. Rogan was born in Newark, New Jersey, and began his career in comedy in 1988 in the Boston area. After relocating to Los Angeles in 1994, he signed an exclusive developmental deal with Disney and appeared as an actor on several television shows including Hardball and News Radio. In 1997, he started working for the UFC as an interviewer and color commentator. He released his first comedy special, I'm Gonna Be Dead Someday, in the year 2000, and hosted the game show Fear Factor from 2001 to 2006. After leaving Fear Factor, Rogan focused on his stand-up career and hosted more comedy specials. He launched the Joe Rogan Experience in 2009. By 2015, it was one of the most popular podcasts in the world, regularly receiving millions of plays per episode. Spotify obtained exclusive distribution rights to the Joe Rogan Experience in 2020 for $200 million. Also very important. Rogan's audience has grown significantly, and in 2024, he renewed his deal with Spotify for an estimated $250 million, but will no longer be exclusive to them. Rogan has voiced support for same-sex marriage, recreational drug legalization, universal healthcare, universal basic income, gun rights, and free speech, while opposing cancel culture and military adventurism. Wow, what a fantastic life. As we can see, Joe Rogan has been an inspirational character. Many people like to think that Joe Rogan is a hateful hate monger, that he says vile things about the LGBT, and they use this because he has had very controversial people on his show who do believe that. People like Matt Walsh.
I think of marriage is a certain thing, which is the context for procreation, for the building of the nuclear family.
I believe that he has been quite mischaracterized. For example, in the instance of LGBT, here is him speaking with Matt Walsh.
Like, if marriage is not what I'm saying it is, then why do we even need it? What's the you're saying it's a man-made institution.
Yes.
But you're also like the way that you're presenting it, it's also a totally meaningless institution. So
No.
they don't need it at all.
No, it's not meaningless. It's because it means something to the people that get married.
So it's just a subjective, symbolic thing. I mean, what?
Yeah.
So if you're
Kind of what it is.
I've heard people tell me that, Brian, I don't know if he's being genuine there. How can you believe him? Look at him. He looks like a gorilla. Right? And let's hear this. When you hear someone say, hey, Joe Rogan's just the idiot gorilla, what he says, he doesn't necessarily mean it, or he doesn't know what he's saying, here's what I hear from the people saying that. This is what they see when they watch Joe Rogan. Let's put that on the screen. Joe Rogan gorilla.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Now, I think the reason that Joe Rogan gets this, this has this displeasure put on him, or has people project that he is just a gorilla or an ape, well, it's because, he likes UFC, I get that, but it's a stereotype. It's one of the very same things that progressives claim, and they should hold to it. I believe in it. Get away from the stereotypes. Move away from the prejudices. The attacks on some of these characters in the right, any of the men in the manosphere, I want to talk a lot about the dangers of using incorrect arguments, or just arguments that have no logical basis, right? And stereotypes, prejudice, that counts to that. Joe Rogan has someone who has been accused of bringing pseudoscience onto his channel, right? We'll touch there. It's in the biography, right? Rogan has been criticized for promoting conspiracy theories, COVID-19 misinformation, and for hosting guests who spread misinformation and pseudoscience. Pseudoscience. Now that is an interesting word. Where have we heard that before? If anyone who doesn't know, pseudoscience is basically fake science. Pseudoscience, fake science. So, as part of this biography, as part of everything that we've spoken of before, there's something that we just haven't heard yet, and something that gets ignored by the media, gets ignored by people who are looking to Joe Rogan to be some kind of scientific moderator, right? And that's that Joe Rogan is a college dropout. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But expecting Joe Rogan to be able to fact check everyone on his show and to criticize him or to assign the views of his guests onto Joe Rogan, it ignores the fact that that's just not what Joe Rogan's doing. That's not Joe Rogan's job. That's the job of the media. That's the job of you as the viewer to be skeptical and fact check the claims that are being presented, right? Like, yeah, Joe Rogan does that sometimes on his show. He can't do it all the time. This is not in defense of misinformation, but it's not like Joe Rogan only has quacks on his shows. He has real scientists on his shows, and he gives them the opportunity to debunk, right? So Joe Rogan, he's not here to necessarily claim, like I would, for example, if astrology is fake or not, right?
What your views were on astrology. I know it's a related science to astronomy.
On what?
On astrology, extrasensory
Astrology is a
perception.
hoax.
What, excuse me?
It's a hoax.
Hoax?
H-O-A-X.
So,
Joe Rogan's position on this would be, if you don't know for certain, be agnostic. His position is that if you don't have a specific reason to go against the grain, why are you going against the grain? He's not someone who is disturbing shit just for the sake of it. He's just hearing people out on his show. That's his job as an influencer. And you might say that the people he brings on sometimes are lowbrow and they're not good enough and they should be fact checked. But let's be real here.
Podcaster Joe Rogan is also now tweeting after his interview with former President Trump, saying the Harris campaign offered for her to come on the podcast, but only for an hour and not in studio. Rogan writes, "I strongly feel the best way to do this is in the studio in Austin. My sincere wish is just to have a nice conversation and get to know her as a human being." What do you make of that? And given the massive size of his audience, how significant would an interview with Rogan be at this stage in the race for Harris?
Yeah, look, it remains to be seen how significant it would be. Of course, Trump did this interview because his campaign is trying and working to reach those younger voters that he so needs to pull over.
Joe Rogan was snubbed by the Kamala Harris campaign, right? Kamala Harris didn't want to go on Joe Rogan's show, or at least, they wanted him to come up and do a 45-minute segment, whatever. The whole controversy was that Joe Rogan snubbed Kamala Harris. I really believe it was all the way. The point of Joe Rogan's show is that you come onto a show and you have a frank conversation without censorship, without a list of questions, without handlers saying, no, we can't do this. That's the point of the show, right? That's why Donald Trump went on. That's why Elon Musk went on. That's why J.D. Vance went on. The people on the right, they saw Joe Rogan for what he is. A guy that you can have a conversation with, that you can have an interesting conversation with, and who many people will see. And quite frankly, that's something that the Kamala Harris campaign should have taken advantage of, and they didn't. But the other thing is that people gave him criticism for not pushing back. When we look at that background that we spoke of, Joe Rogan is a college dropout. That does not mean that he's stupid, but it means that he doesn't necessarily have all of the facts to counter all of the arguments that are on his show, right? So here's an example of climate change. We're going to see Joe Rogan discussing climate change with a far-right influencer, Candace Owens. And Candace Owens is going to have the position that she doesn't believe in climate change, she doesn't understand it, and Joe Rogan is going to do what I believe Joe Rogan normally does. He is going to try and push back on something that isn't based in fact, or he's at least going to try and understand the basis for Candace Owens' belief, right? That is the very important thing about Joe Rogan. Here's the clip.
About global warming. I don't do that.
Right, but why are you saying that you don't think it exists?
I don't know. Maybe because it got because it got so politicized.
Studies into scientific agreement on human-caused global warming, and look at all the studies. It's between 100% and 91% at the lowest. 91% of one of the studies from 2014.
This is the Union of Concerned Scientists.
Yeah, follow how they're making these conclusions and follow the vast majority of these brilliant people who study this shit their whole life.
Yeah, exactly. Candace, you have to have a formed opinion on everything.
No, you don't have to have a formed opinion on everything. What you do have to have is the ability to know when you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
But I just said that. I said that to you the entire time.
I said this believe it.
I said I don't believe it. And then you asked me, and I said this wouldn't be the hill I chose to die on because I don't.
Right,
I don't.
But why
follow
even
it.
say you don't believe in it?
In this instance, Joe Rogan pushes back. Joe Rogan cites the experts. Joe Rogan says, hey, there's like a 98% consensus. The main basis of his argument is he wants to understand why Candace Owens is saying what she is saying. He doesn't believe that it's his job to say that she can't say it. He just wants to understand the argument. That's what he does. So here's an example again with climate change and with one of our other main characters, Jordan Peterson. Let's watch.
But your models aren't based on everything. Your models are based on a set number of variables.
Yeah.
So that means you've reduced the variables, which are everything, to that set. Well, how did you decide which set of variables to include in the equation if it's about everything? And that's not just a criticism. That's like, if it's about everything, your models aren't right.
So once again, I think this is a really fantastic example because it shows two of our main characters, but it also shows the difference in how Candace Owens responded and how Jordan Peterson responded. The basis of Candace Owens' argument was that she just doesn't believe in it. She doesn't know why she should believe it, and for that reason, she doesn't believe it. On the other hand, Jordan Peterson's argument, it is much more complex, and as we mentioned in our trailer, we're hinting at they're basing their arguments in the truth. There is some truth to what Jordan Peterson is saying. There are a lot of parameters into what goes into calculating climate change, and it is a fantastic way to go after people who might not believe in it, or it's a fantastic way at least to try and sway people over to saying, hey, we don't know how climate change works. We don't know, we don't necessarily know if it's man-made or not. I mean, there's so many things that go into it. How do we know, right? But the fact is, we model things all the time. We don't know everything, of course. But the fact of the matter is, Jordan Peterson is a psychologist. When he is speaking to a patient, or when any doctor, or when anyone, whatever, any case, whatever it is, you never have all the facts, right? As humans, as people, we go on the basis of the evidence, the totality of the evidence. And as Joe Rogan showed, 98% of climate scientist experts, they agree that climate change is real.
studies into scientific agreement on human-caused global warming, and look at all the studies. It's between 100% and 91% at the lowest. 91% of one of the studies. Follow how they're making these conclusions and follow the vast majority of these brilliant people who study this shit their whole life.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, Joe Rogan is someone who might not be able to counter the argument that Jordan Peterson is presenting, and he might even be convinced by it if he doesn't hear an explanation of why it might be wrong. But Joe Rogan is not in the mindset. He is not a Masters of Science student. He's not some engineer who's able to say, well, you know, we don't always have all the coefficients in place, and there's always variables. Like that's not Joe Rogan. Like, just stop expecting that from him. If you want to correct things that have been said wrong on Joe Rogan, your best bet is to go on his show and do it. And again, like I said, it's not like he only has quacks on his shows. He has reputable people. He has Brian Cox. He has Neil deGrasse Tyson. Some other people, again, they have their own controversies. But he is not someone who is catering to the right wing. He is someone who is trying to bring interesting characters who have their own audience for whatever reason it is. And he wants to know, why are these people so interesting? Can you explain it to my audience? And that is his role. Joe Rogan, you know, if we were to name all of our men in the manosphere, Joe Rogan is one who I would put squarely, you know, his title would be the Inquisitor. He is the intercollutor. His goal is to have conversations. And if you are expecting Joe Rogan to be, you know, the historian, you know, the fact checker, you're just not accepting that some people have different roles in life, you know? Even Joe Rogan can accept that some people have different roles and they live their life in different ways, as we've seen in this clip.
But don't you think that people should have the freedom to live their life in that way? I think human beings vary widely, in a huge way. And I think there's some human beings that find a very fulfilling life just reading books and traveling and experiencing different things and seeing art and doing whatever the fuck they want to do.
That's something I think you need to accept as well as we go forward. But again, so that's a lot on Joe Rogan. I think that gives you a little bit of a hint into my overall opinions of him, but we'll summarize it more later into the series. But for now, Joe Rogan is the Inquisitor. Okay, he is not someone who is leading the march, but he can give you a really good megaphone. Anyway, so that is quite a bit of Joe Rogan. One of the, you can't deny it, one of the most interesting characters in the world. Someone who appeals to one of the fantasies that most men have, which is to be filthy rich and to be able to do whatever the hell you damn well please. Again, something very important as we go along into the series. Alright? But as I end this up, I want to give you a heads up on what the next episode is going to be about. And I think that is where we're going to focus a bit more on Matt Walsh. You've heard the biography or the background of Joe Rogan. Let's hear Matt Walsh. Let's see if we can spot a little bit of a difference in the preconceived biases that they have, where those biases come from. I think another way that we can really examine what a person believes and what their message is just to simply read what they write. So this is a really great example. We have Matt Walsh's book, Church of Cowards, a wake-up call to complacent Christians. What would you surrender for God? Christians in the Middle East, in much of Asia, and in Africa are still being martyred for the faith. But how many American Christians are willing to lay down their smartphones, let alone their lives, for the faith? Being a Christian in America doesn't require much these days. Suburban megachurches are more like entertainment venues than places to worship God. The lives that American Christian leads aren't much different from those of their atheist neighbors. And their knowledge of theology isn't much better either. Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire exposes the pitiful state of Christianity in America today, lays out the stakes for us, our families, and our eternal salvation, and invites us to a faith that's a lot less easy and comfortable. but that's more real and actually worth something. The spiritual junk food we're stuffing ourselves with is never gonna satisfy. As Saint Augustine said over a millennium ago, our hearts are restless until they rest in Him. Only God Himself can make our lives anything but ultimately meaningless and empty. And we will never get anywhere near Him if we refuse to take up our cross and follow Jesus. This rousing call to the real adventure of a living faith is a wake-up call to the complacent Christians and a rallying cry for anyone dissatisfied with a lukewarm faith. Wow. Very much based in the Catholic tradition. I think that's quite obvious. Maybe not Catholic. I might have overstepped there, but very much Christian and very much willing to share with the world that is something to fight for. So yeah, the next episode is going to be about Matt Walsh, the theologian. If you subscribe, he gets to eat food.